It's time, Fort Wayne. Your sports, your station. It's the Sports Rush with Brett Rump.
Max Landis.
Covering all the topics that hit a nerve here in the Summit City.
Clark goes 11 yards, touchdown.
Only on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Now here's your host, Brett Rump.
The important person of all time.
You are incredible. Older than I'm one. Yeah, well, you're half right.
What is this, amateur hour?
This is going to be huge.
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just when I think you've said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.
I think that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
That boy ain't right.
The simplest way to put it, I have problems.
Welcome to the alleged show.
I don't know why, but I feel like I have to keep checking the calendar to figure out what day it is, because this week has been just an absolute whirlwind. I have been so busy this week, but we've got a big show on tap back from the Detroit area. And thanks to John Nolan for filling in yesterday. It is the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix 4 to 6. Was it yesterday that John filled in, or was it 2 days ago?
It was yesterday.
Okay.
You are losing track of your days.
I am.
My goodness.
I can't remember when I was here, when I wasn't here. I was thinking, wait a minute. I was on the bus listening to John. That was Tuesday. What was on the air yesterday?
Oh, no, what? You are right, John.
See, you're spinning like I'm spinning. We can't keep track of our days, can we?
We're messed up. We are messed up. Yeah, John was gracious enough to fill in on Tuesday.
Did the Green Bay basketball host fill in yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
how nice.
I think we played the Green Bay show.
I got to tell him when he comes to town, he's now my fill-in.
Hey, when we're not on, sometimes you're filling in for me, Dougie.
I'll just say, hey, Dougie, after we go through all of our local contacts, if no one's available, we have you fill in for me. How does that feel? You're like 8th on the list, but no. So big thanks to John on Tuesday for jumping in and filling in. But yeah, so it's been a couple of days since I've been here. I can at least say that.
You can say that, yes.
Monday was the last day I was here.
Yes.
See, that's what's just so confusing to me. I can't remember what days, what happened. And it's not because I'm getting old before everybody jumps on me and say, oh, it's a sign you're getting old.
No, I messed it up too, so it's not an old excuse. I messed up the weekdays too.
Yeah, he was here yesterday. Wait a minute. You're 27, right?
Yep. 27, turned 28 this year.
Yep. So anyway, by the way, we missed a big anniversary.
Oh, we did.
Talk about spinning. 9 years of the Sports Rush as of this past weekend. We're a little late in giving ourselves a congrats on making it 9 years. The over-under, I think, was like 1.5, so we blew that away. If you haven't cashed in on your over yet, you're due some money. But 9 years, hard to believe that it was 9 years ago this little experiment started, and in the small little closet next door.
It is small, yeah.
Well, you put me and DC in a small room, and let me just tell you, there's not much room for oxygen.
You run out of space, yeah.
Yeah, we can fill up a small room rather quickly, but we spent 6 or 7 years together in that room.
Yeah, you sure did.
And then we've just continued to roll on. Caleb Hatch was here as a producer for a while, and then you've been here 2 years?
Yeah, coming up 2 years now.
Wow. Really? I put up with you for 2 years.
I don't know.
Or is it you putting up with me for 2 years?
I think it might be you putting up with me. Because, I came into this role with absolutely no radio experience, no media experience. So it's been a learning lesson for me, absolutely.
Which also tells people just how much skill you need to have Adam's job.
Don't tell them that. They'll be coming for me.
Anybody that can push a button. What does this do? Boom. And that's about it.
That is.
You can answer a phone call. If you can book guests and remember what times you book them, you're pretty well set. But anyway, it's 9 years, and as of today, still counting. So congratulations to the Sports Rush.
Somebody texted in 260-447-8500. Favorite producer you've had so far, Brett? You could say someone else if it's not me.
It's hard because everybody was so unique,
right?
And different
style.
Caleb Hatch, because I see you and DC are similar.
Right.
Caleb was a very analytical. Everything had to be very organized and a very direct approach of this has to happen, this at this. DC, he rolled with the flow as far as whatever my flow was and did a good job of that. And you're a guy that's just willing to do whatever. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. The open attitude that, stay late, get here early, whatever it may be.
They said it's a trap on the text line. They said the question's a trap.
Yeah, they're trying to set you up. Well, it was probably texted in by DC. He's probably asking, who's your favorite producer? And it's probably DC Hendricks with the message.
I can confirm it isn't DC. Somebody else texting in 260-447-8500. They want to say, can we have a party when you guys get to 10 years in 2026?
Yeah. We'll have some party. I'll tell you what, we'll have a party either when we're gone or we get to 10. Because nobody would have expected. I should have brought up when we started the show. Say if I make it to 10 years, I'll tell you what, you owe me a big old Brinks truck, because nobody would have thought 10 years later we'd still be doing this.
And I'm glad we are. I mean, it's like you say, every day it's your local sports fix.
It's radio. Nobody's around 10 years.
Fort Wayne has to have their local sports fix, though, man. There's always so much going on, and you're the guy to talk about it.
I mean, since the 1980s, I would say 10 years is 9 years even is like an eternity in radio.
That's huge, man.
I'm thinking down the hall. We have one show that was on the air when we started in this building. And remember, at Federated Media, we've got quite a few radio stations.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe, no, maybe two.
Maybe two. But it just goes to show, not many shows last that long.
Because we have, morning shows, midday shows, afternoon shows, weekends. I mean, you've got shows all around the clock and almost. I won't tell you when they've got.
Someone has to go home at some point.
Computer running, but yeah. So we are here. We are live each and every weekday that I decide to show up.
That you're not with those dang Dons.
But had to take a road trip. We'll talk about the Dons coming up later. Last night, of course. I was following this during the Mastodons game because I had my phone very busy during the Mastodons because Indiana was playing Northwestern. You had the women's team that's got the undefeated record in the Horizon League. They're playing at Detroit just down the road from where we were.
Yeah, 30 minutes away or so.
Yeah, and then I'm also trying to follow what's happening with Cleveland State, who went into the night with a one-game lead on the Mastodons because I'm thinking if the Mastodons can win and Cleveland State would get knocked off by Detroit Mercy in Cleveland. And at one point, Detroit Mercy did have the lead, that there would be a chance we could end the night with the Mastodons tied for first place. And then everything went upside down. Not only did Cleveland State come back and win, but the Mastodons ended up losing. So, tough night. But I did follow the Indiana Hoosiers. And for a while, I thought, great news. Indiana's playing well. They got Malik Renew back. And then I saw what happened in the second half.
Yeah, it all fell apart. It's the case of bad halves once again for the Indiana Hoosiers, giving up 60 at home in the first half earlier this season, and now giving up a nearly 60-point half to the Wildcats.
54 in the second half to Northwestern. I mean, it's not exactly the most explosive offense, but Ty Berry sure was explosive. Ended up with 7 3-pointers, 23 points. I'll tell you what Indiana really needs. Brooks Barnheiser's the guy that got away from just down the road. In fact, very close to Purdue. And he ended up going to Northwestern. Now, I understand the educational value, and I think that was prioritized with Brooks Barnheiser. But I saw the kid play in high school, just noticed his overall toughness, his determination, his competitive nature. And that's what Indiana needs. They need somebody that just will lead the fight. The guy that, when you see the Warriors running across the field, who's the one that's in the front that's leading the rest of the troops? And to me, that's a Brooks Barnheiser. Kid is tough. I mean, he's not that big. He's 6'5", and, he's done some work in the weight room. But fairly soft-spoken kid. I had a chance to talk to him when we were in Cancun a couple of years ago because Northwestern was there. It was part of the Cancun Challenge. We had a dinner one night, and Brooks was at the dinner. It was an outdoor dinner, really cool at this Cancun Challenge.
Yeah.
Great event. But you've got mid-majors that play during the day. You've got your big schools at night. Northwestern was there. Auburn was there. And had a chance to talk to him briefly. In fact, we talked about Greg Rakestraw, who's going to be a guest on the show today.
Awesome.
But he's very close, and his dad especially, very close with Greg Rakestraw. And so we had a chance to talk. But he was very humble, very kind, soft-spoken. But you put him on the court, and he becomes a different animal.
Yeah, he's one of those, bulldog type of guards. He's just always bruising. He's kind of like Jalen Jackson in a way. He's just determined to get to the basket.
Yeah, just a tough, competitive kid. And Indiana giving up 54 points just shows there is not enough toughness in this Indiana roster. And that's why I say, a Brooks Barnhizer would be fantastic for them. And Barnhizer, by the way, finished 8 of 14 from the field. He struggled at the free throw line, though, just 4 of 9, but he did finish with 21 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Big-time numbers for Brooks Barnhizer last night.
Throwing 6 steals as well. Getting the ball back for the Wildcats was Barnhizer.
There was a Mackenzie Mbako sighting.
Wow, yeah, he actually contributed some points and some shot making.
Had 20 points. Umar Ballo had 15, 7 rebounds. And Luke Goody continued his hot shooting. He was 4 for 5 from distance, had 14 points. But again, if you don't stop anybody from scoring, it's hard to win games. And the Hoosiers, despite scoring 39 points in the second half, which is not a bad number, that's probably right along their average on the season. They're probably averaging, 75, 76 points. And so they score 39 in the second half and give up 54. And, defense is one of those hustle type of stats. I mean, just how much drive, determination, and effort you want to put into it to try to limit the other team. And when they're putting up 54, you're not doing enough, or you're playing at a very fast tempo and just trading baskets. And I'll be honest, the Dons have had halves like this.
Sure.
I mean, it's like somebody's going to say, oh, you don't say that about the Dons. Well, the Dons have had halves like this, where everything becomes so much of an offensive up and down game that neither team really gets overly defensive. And you see second halves sometimes with Dons that end up, 54-50 or 52-49. And you see some of those. But 54 points after holding Northwestern to just 25 in the first half. Indiana had a 6-point lead at the break and ends up losing the game by 9, 79-70 in Evanston. The up and down season continues.
Yep, riding the Hoosiers roller coaster, just way too many threes in that second half for Northwestern. I didn't watch the game, so I don't know if it was, not closing out or if it's, missing rotations or things like that. But Northwestern ends up shooting 48% from 3. That's too much.
Indiana shot 45, which is rare for Indiana. They had 9 threes, 9 of 20. But again, Luke Goody was 4 of 5, and Mbako was 3 of 7. So between the two of them, they had a pretty good night. But you get the return of Malik Renew, obviously limited quite a bit on minutes. He didn't play a lot, but I saw a stat earlier today that the points per possession for Indiana was like half what it was with Renew and Ballo on the floor together. It was about half what it was when only one was on the court.
Wow.
And primarily that was Ballo last night, was the one that was on the court, because Renew ended up only playing like 11 minutes.
Yeah, he was not an impact on the game, no.
But also the points allowed per possession went from like 0.8 to 1.5 something. And so defensively they were worse, which you would think they would be better. If they had a bigger lineup, more rim protection, that they would get better. But apparently it opened up some risk and liability at three-point line, because that's where Northwestern took advantage, especially in that second half, finishing with 13 threes. So I don't know. Take the analytics for what it's worth, but the numbers did not favor Renew and Ballo being out there together.
Yeah, I mean, if you have two bigs out there, you got to have one of them being able to close out shooters. I mean, one of them has to be able to stretch. You can't just park them both on the inside. Did you see this fact about the losing streak against Northwestern? This is Indiana's second ever 5-game losing streak against Northwestern. The first time came between February 1st and January 16th. of 1913 and 1915.
Jeez.
The average final score in those 5 games was 34-22.
And it's hard to believe, but when you think about it, over 110 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
World War I.
Not good.
Not good at all.
260-447-8500, our Parkview Sports Medicine text line. Time to check in on what's happening in the world of sports. In fact, we've got Pacers basketball going on live.
Yeah, we do. The Pacers are currently playing the San Antonio Spurs and Victor Wembanyama in Paris. They are not going to win this first of 2 games. They'll play each other again on Saturday in Paris. Right now, with just a minute and a half remaining in the game, the Spurs lead the Pacers 136-108. Victor Wembanyama going off in his home country. He has 30 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, and 5 blocks.
Pacers did not make this a business trip. I saw all the videos.
They're just having fun?
Yeah. They took it as a company-paid vacation because, just things, the tour of Eiffel Tower and hanging out in Paris. And I just don't think they went with the mindset that there's business to be done. And I think they got caught.
They definitely got caught. Notre Dame cornerback Benjamin Morrison, a freshman All-America selection in 2022, who became a team captain before an October hip injury ended his 2024 season, is headed to the NFL draft. He announced his decision today on social media. Cleveland Browns coach Kevin Stefanski will reassume play calling duties next season after relinquishing them midway through 2024. He made the announcement today as he introduced Tommy Rees as the team's new offensive coordinator. Some AFC South news: the Texans have moved on from team president Greg Grissom and will be looking for new leadership on the business side of their front office. Grissom was previously promoted to team president in 2021 and has been with the team since their inaugural season in 2002. One more for you today, Brett. Ohio State's victory over Notre Dame in Monday night's college football playoff national championship game was the most watched game of the season. However, it was a drop in viewers from last year. ESPN announced last night that the Buckeyes' second national championship in the CFP era averaged 22.1 million viewers. It was the most watched non-NFL sporting event over the past year, but it was a 12% drop from the 25 million who tuned in for Michigan's win over Washington last season. And those are your sports stories.
That's understandable. I'll just tell you, there's a number of factors. Number one, there was a lot going on Monday.
Yeah.
It had an inauguration that only happens every 4 years. Obviously the Martin Luther King holiday, but the game took place a couple of weeks later than normal because of the expanded field. You also, because you had so many rounds of playoffs, there were a lot of games for people to follow, and eventually their teams get beat or they get weeded out. And I know it's still 2 teams, but it's 2 teams that have a very strong Midwestern tie, which means a lot of the country probably did not have a strong incentive to tune in. What did you have last year? You had a Midwest team against a West Coast team. So you may have had incentive for a couple of different regions of the country to tune in, and that might get you a couple million extra people.
Yeah, definitely Midwestern flavor this year with Notre Dame taking on Ohio State.
Coming up, we've got Zach Osterman, who will join us coming up at 4:35. Hour number 2, we've got Greg Rakestraw at around 5:15. Also, Eric Dutkevich from Parkview Sports Medicine is going to jump on with us. We'll talk some high school basketball. Hard to believe, but we're to the final weekend of basketball, final week of basketball for the girls, and they're going to wrap up next week, and then it's on to the tournament.
Yeah, already almost postseason time for the ladies.
Yeah, and I was talking to our program director here the other day, and I said, what's crazy about girls basketball is we're so in deep with the high school football.
Yeah.
When girls basketball begins, and you're right into the heart of the playoffs where you've got your regionals, your semi-state, your state championships. And so we're following all that. It's not really until December till we can get into high school basketball coverage because we've got so much football that we have to cover.
Right.
And I said, by the time we actually start our season of broadcasts, girls basketball's almost made it to the halfway point.
Yeah, we definitely get a late start on the girls' side. I mean, we can only jump into basketball after football, and it goes pretty late.
And so we had a big basketball game a couple of nights ago, and Doug Gottlieb, I'm sure, didn't talk about it yesterday. So we'll have to touch base and kind of recap what happened in the big game we had. And we had play-by-play coverage here on the Parkview Sports Medicine high school basketball game of the week, or games of the week, I guess, and we had an extra Tuesday game.
Yeah, 2 games in 1 week.
Yeah, because coming up tomorrow, we've got the Battle of the Bishops. It will be Lures at Dwenger coming up tomorrow night. First chance to see Bishop Lures and their state-ranked team under Seth Coughing. And that game will be tomorrow night. And our post-game show at the Pizza Hut at Pine Valley. So we look forward to that.
Looking forward to it. Shoot up Clinton, turn on to DuPont, and get down to Pine Valley afterwards.
Oh, good job on the map.
I got you.
You make it very easy. All right, we got to take a break. We're going to come back, and we got to talk about Notre Dame and the gamble that did not pay off for the Irish on Monday. And also coming up, Zach Osterman to talk Indiana basketball. That's in minutes right here on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.
This is Maria Marcasano, head women's basketball coach at Purdue Fort Wayne, and you're listening to the Sports Rush with Brett Rump on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.
Mastodons will be at home for women's basketball this Saturday against IU Indianapolis, while the men will travel to IU Indianapolis.
Home and home.
It's a home and home, but what's interesting is it's the second time this year the exact same schedule has happened, because back in December, the men played at the Coliseum against Paul Casaro's Jaguars, and the women went down and played at the Jungle against IU Indianapolis women's team. So the second time that the two teams will play at like exactly the same time. What kind of schedule is that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Couldn't you at least stagger it so even if you can't be at both, you can watch both?
It's just IU Indy night. Somebody real quick, they text in, why are you not talking about Purdue's bad loss to Ohio State?
What night was that?
I believe it was either Tuesday.
That was Tuesday night, right?
Tuesday night, yeah.
Yeah, because I was traveling.
We slept.
And it was 2 days ago.
It was a bad loss.
I mean, I'm still trying to get through. I mean, the only thing I've had time to talk about, we did talk about Indiana briefly. We haven't gotten very far on the show sheet.
No, but I think it's just somebody wanted to say you're a Purdue homer because you haven't.
Because I'm ignoring the fact that Purdue had a bad loss against Ohio State at home, where they got outscored by 16 points in the second half, and you just don't do that at Mackey Arena. That does not happen. And Purdue's been kind of cruising, and then all of a sudden the wheels fell off in that second half against Ohio State.
It was interesting. You said, I believe it was you said you don't think of it as a trap game, but it could be interesting with Ohio State.
I think John said that when he was filling it.
That might have been John. I lose track of these hosts, too.
You don't even know what day John was here.
No.
You were going to give him credit for yesterday. And
I was going to give you credit for his quote.
Yeah, I should have taken it.
Yeah, you should have. But hey,
especially since it turned out to be kind of true.
It did. Good call, John.
Good call. All right, so Notre Dame played Monday night for the national championship against Ohio State. Congratulations to the Buckeyes. They are victors, and they earned every bit of it. I mean, they outplayed Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But I have a problem with Notre Dame's defensive strategy. And I'm not trying to beat up on the guy that's gone now, but I will. Al Golden has departed for the Cincinnati Bengals. But I don't know why no one spoke up in a room and said, I know you like our guys, but they're not going to be able to cover these Ohio State receivers on an island man-to-man. And that's what Notre Dame gambled on, that their secondary, who Al Golden has trusted in man-to-man coverage all year long, that they were going to be able to stay with the Ohio State receiving corps. You are not going to do it. I'm sorry. This is a different level of receiver at Ohio State. And the whole strategy, if you look at what Texas did, and this is where I'm thinking you had 10 days to prepare. And I know it's not what you do, but at least it's something I'm sure you've practiced, some type of other coverage. And, especially if you knew along the path of the postseason that you might eventually collide with Ohio State, you would think, okay, if we do get matched up against Ohio State, we're going to have to figure out what type of defense, and it's probably not going to be man coverage exclusively, because Texas played that shell, tried to keep everything in front of them and close in and try to, take some space away, try a little press coverage with zone behind, and all these different things that Texas did that were somewhat effective against Ohio State. It at least slowed them down.
Mm-hmm.
But, the only time that Notre Dame eventually started stopping Ohio State was when Ohio State went to that conservative offense, thinking they wanted to burn time because they had the big lead and the clock was then their friend, and didn't want to gamble on a big pick six or some kind of a high-risk play, so they tried to run the ball, and got themselves in some bad positions and ended up having to punt it or give the ball up to Notre Dame. But Notre Dame could not play man-to-man defense. And a perfect example then was that late drive for Ohio State when Notre Dame had to come up with a stop, and you had wide open space for Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, is he the best receiver in the country? If not, he's one of the top 2 or 3, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you don't resist him at all, give him any resistance at the line of scrimmage, no press coverage, no resistance. He comes off the line free and clear. Then he runs down the field with 10 yards of space. He can kind of do what he wants. He sets up the defensive back, and that's Christian Gray, who, by the way, is the guy we talked about on the show. And, Adam, this was me talking, that I said that was the matchup that concerned me, was that the Ohio State was going to find ways to isolate Christian Gray, and I wasn't sure that Christian Gray wasn't going to get exposed. If Notre Dame put him in that type of position, it exactly happened at the biggest moment of the game. Ohio State got the man-to-man coverage they wanted, and Jeremiah Smith could have basically stopped, ordered dinner, and eaten it before Christian Gray got to coverage on that last pass. It didn't have to be a perfect pass. Just throw it out there, complete it, and make the big play, move the chains, keep the clock running. That was the killer for Notre Dame because they had to get that 3rd and 12 stop, and they give up a, 40-yard play and game over.
Yeah, I think nothing really displayed the difference in talent than that play. It's very exemplary of just the overall game. And like you said, Smith could have had, he just had so much separation. It was just a wide open catch, basically.
And one thing that Notre Dame has relied on, which has allowed them to play the man-to-man defense, is pressure on the quarterback. And Ohio State did a terrific job of keeping Notre Dame away from Will Howard.
Yes.
And giving him time to throw. And he was taking full advantage. I mean, at one time, what was he, 17 for 19 or something like that? He had a ridiculous percentage going because he had time to sit in the pocket. And with man-to-man coverage, if he had time, somebody was going to break clear. And it was happening time and time again. A variety of guys. I mean, the tight end made a catch where he was wide open. You had receivers. And credit, too, to Will Howard, because I've not been that high on him. I wasn't sure if he was going to be good enough to take Ohio State to this level. But he read his progressions. He found the right receiver, and he made accurate throws. I mean, he did the job.
Yeah, he did what he had to do, only 4 incompletions. And I think I said on Monday that if Notre Dame wants a chance in this game, that they're going to have to force Will Howard into at least one turnover, a fumble, or an interception just to get another chance to put points on the board. And no, he was too clean, thanks in part to the offensive line.
The other way you defend a high-powered offense that has so much skill on it is you keep the football away from them. And Notre Dame couldn't really get the running game going, and to me, almost abandoned it. I mean, that first drive, I thought they had a nice mix of plays. They had a number of third down conversions with Riley Leonard. In fact, I think 1 or 2 of them might have been a 4th down.
Yeah.
But they trusted Riley Leonard, and those running backs have been productive all year long, and they kind of got away from it. A little bit of what Indiana did against Ohio State, but ultimately, Ohio State puts a lot of pressure on you because their ability to score every possession, and they scored on the first 4 times they got the football, they went 4 touchdowns, and game over. I mean, we said that on Monday, that the one thing Notre Dame couldn't find themselves in, they couldn't afford to find themselves in, would be a multi-score deficit. They found themselves in that spot. Credit to Notre Dame for continuing to fight. That's why there's the fight and Fighting Irish, but not enough.
Definitely not enough.
And by the way, that field goal was a pretty big kick.
Yeah.
To a lot of people.
Was it have to do with the over and the under? And
the spread. It was 9.5 in an 8-point game, and the field goal made it 11. And Ohio State bettors all rejoiced. They had covered.
Cha-ching.
All right, we'll take a break, and when we come back, Zach Osterman from the Indy Star covers the Indiana Hoosiers, and we will talk about the state of the Hoosiers with Zach Osterman when we come back right here on the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Coming up in hour number 2, Greg Rakestraw joins the program. That will be about 5:15. Also, Eric Dukevich from Parkview Sports Medicine joins us to talk area high school basketball at about 5:35. Right now, we want to talk Indiana Hoosiers because they seem to be the one full of storylines, and Zach Osterman covers the beat for the Indy Star. And, Zach, I don't even know where to begin with the Hoosiers, but I'm going to start with this, that we are 20 games into the season. 20 games. It's a group that's been together since June. When will Mike Woodson finally have answers and figure this group out?
I think I lost you there for a second. What was that?
I said we are 20 games into the season, a group that's been together since June. At what point will Mike Woodson finally have answers and have this team figured out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a point in the season when it's not unfair to wonder if it will get figured out. I mean, listen, one of the unfortunate or uncomfortable truths of inconsistent basketball teams is sometimes that becomes kind of their defining characteristic, that you can see the good, you can see sort of the theory of it, how the pieces could fit together, so to speak, how they sometimes do, in fits and starts, but that it just doesn't happen consistently. And that's, in my experience and probably yours as well, Brett, that there's never one reason for that. There's a little bit of coaching, a little bit of performance, a little bit of scheme, a little bit of, chemistry and whatever. But, I do think that, mid-late January, I think is the time when you're allowed to start asking if not now, when? And, I think in my experience, as somebody who's covered, frankly, a few too many of these teams down the years, sometimes the answer is never, to be honest.
As you said, there's usually multiple reasons. What did you see as the primary reason or reasons in last night's loss at Northwestern?
Yeah, one of the consistent talking points around this team has been its inconsistency defensively. And I think what probably frustrates you last night if you're Indiana, and what maybe Lynn's last night, I never want to make one game a referendum on a season, but what maybe Lynn's last night sort of a weight unto itself. Northwestern's not a very good offensive team. They have a couple very good offensive players, a couple players that can shoot the ball well, but statistically, on the whole, they're not a particularly, consistently dangerous offensive team. And Indiana really made them look pretty impotent there in the first half. If not for Ty Berry scoring, I think it was 11 points off the bench, Northwestern, frankly, was fortunate to get to 25 at halftime. They looked out of sorts. Indiana took Brooks Barnheiser away. Indiana was grinding them with pace. Indiana was outworking them on the boards. Matthew Nicholson's one of the better post defenders in the league, and he was struggling with Umar Ballo. And you felt like, okay, on the back of the Ohio State game when Indiana shows some life and shows some fight and, kind of pulls together a little bit, here's Indiana showing it can kind of scrap its way through a game that was never going to be pretty. It's a road game against a team that bends toward defense, but they're putting it together in ways that tend to reward teams with wins. And for that to just, so completely come apart, I think one of the most revealing things Mike Woodson said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the quotes right in front of me, but he basically said the stuff we were guarding well in the first half, we just stopped guarding well in the second half. And back to your point about, well, if you're the coach, why can't you answer the question of why that is and how do you fix it? But it sort of circles back to this idea that last night felt like about as clean of kind of a 40-minute example of this team's just sort of inescapable inconsistency, that they can look for 20, 25, maybe even 30 minutes like a team that's capable of going on the road and grinding out a tough win in conference play, and then it can just, completely and totally come apart. And, it's hard to sort of get your arms around a team like that after a performance like that, except to maybe wonder, are they going to struggle to find that a consistency at any point this season? And I will say, I like, it's not my job to overly, damn or defend anybody. I do think there is a real level of earnestness. I think everybody involved wants to figure it out. I think when you hear the way players like, Umar Ballo and Luke Goody and Anthony Leal and Miles Rice and Trey Galloway talk about, the journey of this season, I think players are working hard to figure out where that is. I think, coaches are always going to bend a little bit more toward cliches, but I think Mike Woodson and his staff are trying to figure it out. Sometimes you just don't find it. And that's, last night felt like maybe a suggestion that might be Indiana this winter.
When you look at this roster, and you mentioned it, and I guess I've got to elaborate, when you talk about everybody seems to have the same goal and the same focus, and they all want to turn it around, but it is a collection of, and I don't want to call them misfits, but you did bring in a lot of new names to this roster among the ones you just mentioned. And I guess the question is, what is the chemistry? Is this a team that is closely unified?
I mean, it certainly seems that way, and I think that, its seniors speak very well. They speak very sort of not just eloquently, but very sort of resolutely. They talk about backing one another up. They seem like they really, have a kind of a real sense of togetherness and pride about one another. I mean, even an incident like what happens at the end of the Illinois game, I think, Luke Goody is the one who says, Umar knows he can't do that, but he's stepping in there trying to defend his teammate. And we're always going to appreciate that. You're always walking that line. Listen, there's not a perfectly clean answer to that question, because the flip side to that is you see a team like Michigan or a team like Illinois that, should be just as challenged by some of those sort of concerns around chemistry, togetherness, whatever. A first-year coach, or in Illinois' case, a roster that's been dramatically remade through the portal, and they don't have those issues. And so you say, well, then what's the difference? What's holding this group back? And again, in my experience, it's always a little bit of a lot of different things, but all the best will in the world can be there if ultimately the performances and the outcomes don't match it up, then you do start to get into that territory that every sports team, I guess, fears, which is the old Bill Parcells line of "you are what your record says you are."
Zach, it's interesting. You've covered this team for quite a while, and I kind of feel like I sit here in late January, and it's deja vu all over again. So many Hoosiers teams have been in this type of spot where Hoosiers fans are disappointed, complain about games that might have been lost, that should have been won, but yet everybody's still hanging on to hope that this team can figure it out, can get over that hump. Too often it's not happened that way. I mean, usually you get to this point, and if there's question marks, they don't become exclamation points between now and March. What's the possibilities for this team? Do you see it in this group? You've said a lot of things that I think give Indiana fans some optimism and hope that there's good chemistry. They all seem to be focused, wanting to turn it around. I'm a little concerned that the one variable that isn't seeming to go along with the message is Mike Woodson. But what do you think about the chances for this team being different than some of the Hoosier teams in the past that have gotten to this same exact spot in the season, and you try to start calculating what can they finish with their record that should get them in the tournament, and then you fall just a dollar short? What about this team that's different?
There have been moments. I mean, there have certainly, even in some games they've lost, even last night, there are moments when you feel like the right combination of players is on the floor, the chemistry between them is good, just little bits and pieces where players are connected at a level that sort of raises the collective. But obviously, the issue is it hasn't been sustained, and to come around to what we were talking about at the beginning, I mean, there probably comes a point in any season, and I don't think 2/3 of the way through is an unfair, sort of mile marker to start asking the question of, well, if not now, when? And if not when, then is this just what this team's going to be? Is this just kind of, what this team is and what it's going to be capable of, for better and for worse, across the course of the season? And listen, I'm always hesitant I'm always kind of reserved as a beat writer not to, make grand pronouncements on different things. At the end of the day, I think any coach worth their salt would tell you that sort of thing comes back to the coach. Mm-hmm. That sort of issue, what you're talking about, finding ways to put players in positions to be their best, to get the most consistent sort of, not just effort, but obviously execution out of them, to get them confident, to get them executing. All of that stuff comes back to a coach and his staff. And, I understand to a point when Indiana fans say, well, Mike Woodson just keeps saying the same things after every game. When's he going to say something different? Well, my response to that is generally, is pretty often, nothing he could say makes a difference. It's what he's doing. And, I have no doubt that Mike Woodson is trying. I have no doubt at all that Mike Woodson wants that kind of success that you're talking about as badly as any of his players, if not more so. But wanting it and finding it are two different things. And Woodson is hardly the first Indiana coach in the last few years that maybe has struggled to figure out a way to clear that bar, however you want to define it. Is it a certain number of wins? Is it a finishing place in the Big Ten? Is it making the tournament? Is it making the tournament at a minimum seed line? Is it advancing to the second weekend, to the Elite Eight, whatever? Mike Woodson himself has said Big Ten and national championships. That has consistently been his, kind of his own measuring stick, his own expectation, and obviously Indiana's not gotten there. So I think any coach, worth their salary, worth their experience, worth their resume, whatever, would tell you that, in the end, it should come back to their desk. It should come back to their feet. And I don't think it's unfair to say that, if things just continue to kind of seesaw back and forth between encouraging and discouraging and successful and unsuccessful and whatever, that will wind up back in front of Mike Woodson in the end.
By the way, if that does come back to Mike Woodson, if Indiana's ever in need of a coach, what are the percentages? Is there a percentage that Chris Collins could be available?
Yeah, I don't have a great feel for his situation at Northwestern, other than simply to say he's been there a long time. I think it's probably fair to say he's very settled there. I think Indiana, in general, even though I know some of this stuff has become a little bit less taboo than maybe it was in a more sort of unwritten rules kind of way a few years ago, there is still kind of you can't find a lot of examples across a lot of sports, frankly, of Big Ten schools hiring from one another. That's not something that's done super consistently. Not that it's never happened. But, I'm thinking about coaches that have maybe wound up like Brett Bielema, for example. Yes, Wisconsin and Illinois, but there's the sojourn through Arkansas in between. I'm even trying to think about times it's happened, in non-revenue sports. Indiana's got a volleyball coach named Steve Aird that it hired from Maryland, but Maryland was kind of in a place where it couldn't commit the resources to volleyball in that moment in time that Aird, kind of felt he needed to take the program up another level. And so there was a little bit of kind of everybody accepting that it was maybe for the best if the parties went their separate ways. My point is, that kind of thing doesn't happen a ton. Now, I'm not saying it would preclude Indiana from considering Chris Collins. I don't think it should if, in the event that the job were to come open. I think you'd probably at least need to have that kind of that sort of conversation. But again, that's where I come back to, my impression is Chris Collins is pretty settled at Northwestern. Obviously, he's had a lot of success. I know this year, they're maybe starting to just kind of pull themselves back up after some rocky moments in the first couple months. But, he's the only coach that's ever taken Northwestern to the tournament. He had them in a top 4 Big Ten finish 2 years ago. He's given that program a level of steadiness and a certain reputation, I think it's fair to say, that were both hard-earned and are both justified now. And, I guess part of me also just wouldn't be shocked if Chris Collins said, I'm good where I am. I'm comfortable where I lay my head down at night.
It's kind of interesting because I think the two top names that you'd be hearing from Hoosier fans are probably both coaching in the Big Ten right now, with another guy up in Ann Arbor who just kind of got started with the Michigan Wolverines in a different spot than Chris Collins. But it's all hypothetical at this point, Zach. And right now the Hoosiers have a month and a half or so, 2 months to get it figured out. Always appreciate you, and look forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, as always.
Zach Osterman from the Indy Star covers the Indiana Hoosiers, joining us here on the Sports Rush. 260-447-8500, the Parkview Sports Medicine text line. Questions, comments, suggestions. Coming up in hour number 2, we'll talk to Greg Rakestraw down in Indianapolis. We'll talk about the Colts situation with new defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, what he thinks about that. Also, Eric Dutkiewicz to give us a preview of this week's high school basketball and give us his weekly power rankings. That's all coming up before we wrap it up at 6. It's the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.